So Derek and I go back and forth. Our common denominator is that we love communities, we love kids, we love people. I know this is a secular institution. We love God. And all of those things help us love each other and love you and love our work. And so I told Derek to please take free form creative license with anything he wanted to do with us this evening. Derek has a whole lot of tricks up his sleeve. And I told him that he could do a formal presentation if he wanted to. He could play some games with us if he wanted. He could ask us pointed questions. He could tell us about his journey in life or any and all of the above. So I'm going to turn it over to him. And Derek, thank you. Please
Thanks,
welcome Derek
Cynthia.
Peterson.
Well, hey everybody, excited to be here. I just got in from Houston, Texas, and Austin, and I was working with the Houston Independent School District for a few days. It's COVID, you can imagine, has been hard for a international consultant. I used to fly close to 170,000 miles a year, and in the last 17 months, I haven't. And it has been a burden and a blessing to, I've traveled so long, very many years, I kind of forgot what it was like not to. And I kind of like being home. So it's I'm 60 years old, and I'm glad I'm not 50. This would have been hard on me not to have had the last 10 years of learning that I had and before. But I have some colleagues who are lamenting the change in the world. But so here we go. Who am I and why might you care? I think that's a great way to start any conversation when somebody presents, because we all have biases. And those biases, sometimes people try to hide them. But I find that by letting them out on the table, that people can define me the way they want and discount me early on or embrace what I would say early on. So who am I and why might you care? So I'm Norwegian. Jeg snakker litt norsk. I speak a little Norwegian. I understand a little Norwegian. I'm living in the house my great grandfather built here on the prairies. We inherited it not as an asset, but as a stewardship. So it's my job. I'm the oldest of the clan to keep this old farmstead alive long enough for my next generation to have it, and they'll be a steward of it. And so that's a family thing. Love it or leave it. But it's not an asset. It's actually a cashectomy. That's when actually the bank comes in and starts taking money out of you, so you can fix up an old farm. It's beautiful. This is where I spent part of my growing up. I had two moms. One was my bio mom. One was my grandmother, because my parents were BIA teachers, Bureau of Indian Affairs teachers. So I grew up on Standing Rock Reservation in the village of Cannonball and the village of Moose Lake, Minnesota. So it's Cannonball, North Dakota, Moose Lake, Minnesota, right south of the Anishinaabe Reservation. And so it was the 60s and the 70s, and you can imagine where you grow up matters a lot. And I didn't know that the way I grew up as a blue-eyed Norwegian would be informed by my growing up, but I've spent my life advocating for American Indian, Alaska Native, and Eskimo people around the circumpolar north and Canada, Western Canada, and the Western U.S. And so, who am I? Why might you care? I was Alaska's child and youth advocate for many, many years. For 11 years, I was Alaska Educator of the Year back in the year 2000. Why that's significant is I'm not a teacher. I've worked in 177 Alaskan villages by invitation. And so while I'm not a classroom teacher like Janine, I believe you are, I taught in many, 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 many different schools. And so that's why they decided to give me that award. And I was also the same year Alaska Prevention Professional of the Year. And I'm not a social worker or a drug alcohol counselor. That was also it was okay. Alaska's a small state, and so the story I'm going to show you, I think you've already seen it. Cynthia sent you a YouTube video link. Is that right? Did everybody raise your hand if you had a chance to see that napkin talk? Raise your hand. Alex, Dawn, Diane. Okay, Kristen, okay. So those of you who watched that napkin talk, you're going to be a step ahead of your colleagues because I'm not going to give it again because I'd like to go a little bit deeper. Those of you who didn't watch the napkin talk, it's going to make sense what I show you anyway, but the napkin talk folks will have a little bit of a head start because they'll see the big picture. And how about this? They'll see the elephant, and you guys are going to learn the elephant by learning about the ears and the trunk and the tail and the foot. And when you see all the pieces, you'll go, that's an elephant. And that's how we're going to do this. But the people who saw the video saw the whole elephant. We raised tens of millions of dollars for this work. So I just want you to know that this isn't a couple of guys who had a great idea and a theory and pulled it out of our tails. We hired some of the smartest people in America and Canada to teach us. And our work was embedded in the first No Child Left Behind legislation. Senator Ted Stevens was the appropriations chair, the senior senator from Alaska. He was a friend of mine. He was my patron, and he gave me $2 million a year. He really was a patron of mine, and I wouldn't be talking to you if it weren't for Senator Ted Stevens. We've got about 400,000 books circulating around America and around Canada, and my name is never on the cover. It's always on the third page. But don't ever write a popular book and put your name on the cover. It'll wreck your life. Make sure your name's on the third page because you still get a life then. So that's my biases. I'm married, don't have any bio children, but I have children around the world that I love and who love me and who call me their PH. Get this party started. So what's the best place to start? Right here. So I'm going to share with you some slides that this is from the Treaty 6 conference in Northern Canada. So Treaty 6, for those of you who don't know, Alaska has something called the Alaska Federation of Natives. It's where all of the Alaska Native groups and subgroups have joined together and formed a political body that they lobby government, state, and federal government for their rights. So Treaty 6 is Northern Alberta's kind of version of Alaska Federation of Natives. So Cree, Métis, Beaver, Nakota, and others have come together. Blackfeet have come together to have political power. So I was keynoting their conference. You can imagine our workshops are very experiential, even keynotes. Cynthia has seen this. I'm not much of a lecturer. I don't really, you guys know the expression, right? Tell me I forget. Tell me I forget. Show me I remember. And involve me I understand. And my work is to change the whole world around whole children. So my work is to change the whole world around whole children. And the only way I can do that is to involve you in the process during the keynote. Otherwise, it's just good information that you'll pass on, but you might not get it at that visceral level. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to measure how much love a child feels, a teenager feels, and correlate that to their thriving, to their well-being, and their avoidance of risk behaviors, drug, alcohol, suicidal ideation, not wearing a helmet when you're riding your bicycle, not wearing a helmet on the skateboard, riding a car with a drinking driver, carrying a weapon to school. There's 23 risk behaviors that are currently being measured by the Youth Risk Behavior Survey at the U.S. level, at the federal level and state level. And our work can mitigate the story, and the work associated with it can reduce the likelihood of every one of those. So instead of going into a group of silos and saying, well, this is how mentoring does it, this is how drug and alcohol does it, this is how suicide prevention does it, we go in and say, here's the metrics, here's the measures that you're aiming for. How do you hit that same target in your metrics, in your work, in your nonprofit or in your government program? Some people may think that the love word is too touchy-feely, too God-based, whether you're Islam, Christian, Jew, a Kankar, whatever faith you practice. Love seems to fall into that realm, not into the social development, not into the social sciences, psychological sciences. And I haven't found that to be true. Whenever I read Maslow, whenever I read he's in the 40s, Freud, Jung, but because they're trying to legitimize their work, but truly it's all love. For those of you who think that's too touchy-feely, which is fine, you can call it support. I can measure how much support children have, youth have, and correlate that to their thriving and to their avoidance of risk behaviors. And why support is important is because I have a National Science Foundation grant with Purdue University. And when I went into, it's a 5-year grant. And so let me just tell you a couple things. One, the National Science Foundation grant are not touchy-feely people. They really aren't. I mean, they're good people. They're just not known for their touchy-feeliness. And where my project is based in Purdue is the Honors School of Agricultural Engineering. Again, farmers getting their PhD. A lot of touchy-feelies up there. A lot of hugging, a lot of teddy bears. Not, right? Not. So they do the work. We finished the project. What we know is that by creating webs of support for underrepresented minorities who have been recruited hard at Purdue's Honor School of Ag Engineering, we can have them graduate on time, which is significant, and we can have them retain them at Purdue, even though they may change their major. So we've had very good luck with that. When I work with communities, I help them write books. That's why my name is on the third page. This is a book written by my kids in the upper Yukon River region of Alaska. I think there's only about 2,000 copies of this book out there in the world. But what's cool is the kids get to say I wrote it, and I got to help them with it. So the whole outcome of this whole thing, so for those of you who saw the video, is we can measure how much, it's truly, we have metrics and we have measures. So the napkin talk that you saw and the story I'm about to share with you came after the metrics were found. So that's significant. We came up with the metrics, with the numbers, with the data sets, and then we had to make a story to communicate it to a busy school superintendent, because you only get about 8 minutes to hook them, and maybe you can get 15 minutes after that. Or a busy state or local official, House representatives at the state government, or a school board member. Or a busy Head Start dad, guy who's just dropping his daughter off at Head Start. Don't be thinking they're any less busy than the superintendent or the elected official, right? Everybody's busy. So this is the outcome. This measures the developmental ecology of a child. And we can talk about this a little bit later, but I want you to burn that in. It's a snapshot. We call it a snapshot. It's a snapshot of time. And just to really kind of be controversial maybe for all y'all, maybe not, is our data sets are not aggregated. So I don't go into a school district and let the district aggregate the data, because I tell them, what do you care what the non-existent theoretical average kid has in terms of their web of support? You don't even know their name. It's a fabrication. I need you to know their names. So what does this mean is that when a district hires me, or a church or a community, this data is the kid's property. And we do that for two reasons. One, we don't want the kid to lie. It's really easy to fudge, fake, lie on the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, right? It's self-reported data. It's really easy to fudge, fake, or lie on a typical like developmental asset survey, the Search Institute, or Hawkins Catalano's Communities That Care survey, or the Devereaux, right? The Devereaux survey. I don't want to pick on these. It's just really hard because you don't know what's in a kid's mind or heart. So what we really do is we tell the kids, we're not sharing this with anybody, because the most important person in the world to know the data is you. And you can share it with anybody you like, but it's your data. And the kids are always blown away by that. So like, really, no, this is your data. You get to share it with whoever you like. And We'll talk more about that later, but it's highly portable, so the kids have it in their back pocket. Um, so you know the factors. Factor red. So we go through the rainbow. Roy G. Biv. Red is the rule of five. Okay, and then we go to yellow are the intangible. So actually, orange, Roy, are the tangible strings that are caught by red. Okay, they're the tangible strings, the tangible protective factors for those of you who work in drug and alcohol, suicide prevention silos, and or learning supports. Those of you who work in elementary, secondary, or higher education, there's a lot of data sets around learning supports. Protective factors are in the drug and alcohol, suicide prevention, SAMHSA people. When you look at the two lists side by side, there's very little difference. I'll just tell you that. But they have decided to make two lists rather than a human list. They make their two lists. This work has made a human list. So I have conflated the two. And if you're interested in how the data set was set up, we can talk about that. It's a little bit boring, maybe, but maybe for some of you who are pursuing advanced postdoctorate work, you might be more interested in that, especially if you're going to want to do your thesis on or your dissertation on something that your committee will find that you overstretched. Intangibles, virtues and values. Oh, you hear it all the time politically. America's lost its values. Americans, they don't have the problem with that kid is they didn't have any values. Well, in our work, you catch your values, your virtues and values, your intangibles, your courage, your positive view, personal future, your ability to persevere from people, right? And I'm gonna stop talking here pretty quick, and you're gonna do a little simple version of this, and that makes this web of support, right? And so, in my work, rather than ask a kid, "How are you today?" We don't do that anymore in the schools and the places I work with. How's your net working for you? How's your net working for you? How's your web working for you? It's a whole different question. It gets at the same thing, but it gets you a much better answer than how are you today? Fine. How's your net working for you? How's your web working for you? And kids will actually be able to go through Roy G. Biv and pretty quickly and tell you how things are going if they are connected to you, if they know that you care to ask. I show you this picture only because we've had this is used to be Minnesota, Alaska's governor. I've worked with many governors, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arizona, Alaska. And they get up there and do all the work just like other people. So they're as interested in what kids need as everybody else. And we talk about then what's your net worth. So what does that mean? A lot of Americans, maybe those of us on this call, we know that money is very important to the American culture. It's very important to the global culture. You can't go anywhere on the planet and not be more free if you've got pesos or rubles or won in your wallet or dollars. That's the whole world is a money economy pretty much. However, there's also a social social capital. So there's financial capital. There's also social capital. And social capital in our work is just as important and just as fungible, just as investable as financial capital. And so when I talk to, I've done this workshop for big brokerages, and I've talked about how you're out there telling your clients to get, to maximize their rate of return on their investment packages. What are you doing to tell them about how to make sure that their kids are okay? What are you going to do to make sure that you let them know that they're okay, that they're when they age, that they'll have enough social capital to live as long as Cynthia's parents, to live as long as my grandma, 103, so that they can cope with. Actually, because as you age, we're learning that social capital becomes much more important than financial capital. Financial capital is really big in our time right now, but even most investment people will tell you as you age, you spend less money because you hopefully have got your debt load paid off and you are slowing down a bit. And the truth is, then what's more important? Your social capital. So what's your net worth is a double entendre. How much money you got in the bank and what's your social capital? And so all of us on this call, we always have to be aware of our social capital. So red, we're going to start with red. Can all of y'all take a blank sheet of paper right now? And could be a Post-it note, could be a blank sheet of paper. And I'm going to tell you that this is a very non-scientific thing I'm going to give you, but I want to give you something so that you can actually do with your kids, your bio kids, your adopted kids, the kids you love in your life, and or try maybe with some kids at work, where you go to work, one or two that you're connected to, and just see what you learn. So we're going to measure red. Please know this is not an algorithm. This is very simple. But for kids you know well, you would never do this to a stranger. You would never do what I'm about to do to a strange kid. You never. If you do, you're evil. I'll just tell you that, okay? Because you can use my work to harm a child if you don't know who that child is and can be loving in the moment. So I'll just tell you, it's very exciting, and you want to do it with the whole class because it's good stuff. But if you're not connected, you don't do this with children. And when I talk about children, what I'm going to do now is pretty good for 11, 12-year-olds on up. I would never do it with an elementary school. We have another way to do this, and that's a whole nother class. So you would never do what I'm about to do with elementary school kids. You maybe could if you're their bio parent or adopted parent and really connected, because you could frame it for them, but never to a stranger's child. So with that, I want you to think back. Watch what I do. I want you to think back to when you were 16 years old. Poof, you're all 16. Whatever year that was, poof, you are 16 years old. And watch what I do. It's October of your 16th year. It's October of your 16th year. And it's the first Friday of October on your 16th year. Do the best you can. On the blank sheet of paper with a pen in your hand, write down the names, every name you can think of the adults who really cared about you. Really cared about you. This might mean that they would miss you if you didn't show up to school or worship, or they noticed you weren't out playing in the yard. This might mean really cared, but they knew your name and they greeted you. Who really cared about you? Just make a list. It can be 2 names. It can be 20 names. It's not a contest.
Only adults, Derek? Only adults?
Yep.
Okay.
Only adults. Yep. Only adults. In about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now take your pen and circle the names of the adults who expected more out of you than you expected of yourself. Circle the names of the adults who expected more out of you than you expected of yourself. And if you had high expectations for yourself, who had at least that much or more than you? If you had typical expectations, who expected more? If you had high expectations, I'm going to be an astronaut, I'm going to make it the NBA, who expected at least that much or more? Circle the names. I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. Circle the names of the adults who expected more out of you than you expected of yourself, or if you had high expectations, who expected at least as much or more. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now you're going to look at the list that you circled, and who are the people, the list that you circled, who are the people that could parent, teach, minister, guide, mentor, you coach into those expectations. So put a star by the people who could parent, coach, mentor, teach, uncle, adult you into those expectations. On the bottom of your sheet, you're going to make 3 dashes. 1, 2, 3 dashes. 1, 2, 3 dashes at the bottom of your sheet. The first dash, of course, is how many names you wrote. Just count them all up and put that number there. 3, 14, 7. The second number, of course, is the number that you circled. And the third number, of course, is the number that you starred and circled. I'm not going to ask you to share these. You can, they're kind of private. The first thing I'm going to tell you, as adults, whatever numbers you have showing up on your sheet were enough. See what I just told you? Whatever, I sometimes do this with adults and they look at, oh man, I didn't have as many as I thought I did. I knew I had a hard childhood. I don't know what kind of childhood you had, but if you're in Cynthia's program getting an advanced degree, whatever you had back then was enough to get you right here. So let go any guilt, forgive all the people who you thought weren't there for you. You're right here, right now, and you're doing okay. Well, you have to remember, though, if you give this survey to a kid that you love and never to a kid that you don't know, you're actually getting a snapshot, at least in their color red, of where they are right now, and you can't guarantee, you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know where they're going to get. So you are going to be the adult that you needed back then to make sure that when they take this survey, when they're your age, they're right where they are, right where you are, and they go, wow, I had enough, whatever that enough meant. This is very frustrating for some people who do my work because they want that number to be a solid. They want that number to be way solid. They want it to be the same for everybody. And I'm telling you, sending millions of dollars in data, it's complexity and it's mapping a developmental universe. What we know is that so what your 5 is really your second number. The first number you wrote is your caring. Those are adults that you probably could have brought in and relied on very loosely. There's actually psychology around loose ties and strong ties. If you are interested in that, we can talk about that someday. But those would be loosely tied adults, but they're not your anchors. So the rule of 5 are your anchors, and that would be the second number. And the third number is the anchors. So you started catching strings really from the second column, from the second number. And then you caught more strings, and those strings were far more influential to you. If you want to think of being thicker strings or more braided strings, those strings were more powerful to you. So when I say, Diane, tell me a story about your courage and who you caught it from, you'd see a correlation between the courage, Diane, that you manifest today as an adult and who you caught courage from. There's psychology around modeled it. There's all kinds of fancy words for it, but we talk about catching it. You catch it and you held it, right? And then the more adults that you caught and held courage from, the broader bandwidth you have for courage. Not the more courage you have, just the different manifestations of courage. Now, in red, there's no way we have time to talk about this, but you've just got a very simple snapshot on red. And it's the rule of 5, comma, the power of more. The rule of 5, comma, the power of more. The rule of 5, comma, the power of more. That's the way we teach it to children and to teenagers. It's not quite true for children, but just because I said that. So a child 10 years old or younger, we teach this. We teach the power of 1, heartbeat, 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 more. See what I just did? The power of 1, heartbeat, 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 pause. That just means you're pausing, more. We do that because a child has less self-agency to choose adults to be their anchors as a kid who starts approaching 14 years old, 13 years old, middle school, high school. Then our culture allows more self-agency in choosing, and in a developmentally appropriate way, looking at Erik Erikson's stages and others, when a teenager starts to individuate, Freud and Jung, and push back from the web that they were born into, our culture, the Western culture, usually allows a young person to start choosing their anchors. So a child can't. That means it's one mom, a single dad, living with a single grandma is enough. You got to let a child know that they have enough. But you pause 3 heartbeats and say more, because there's no downside to getting connected to that Head Start teacher or that third grade teacher or the food service worker in the elementary school or the custodian or someone in the faith community. We need to even open up children's minds. I know stranger danger is out there. I get it all the time. Stranger danger doesn't really help disconnected kids very much. I'll be honest with you. Stranger danger works for very thickly webbed kids who are protecting them from the crazy others. But disconnected kids need associations and connections so deeply that we need to create safe spaces in churches, synagogues, temples, schools, so that those relationships and the kids know that they can count on us. Questions, comments, or concerns? All you got to do is raise your finger or raise your hand and I'll call on you. Questions, comments, or concerns about the rule of 5?
Well, I would just comment, and it does feel kind of weird but I'm thinking about, I wonder if my English teacher had any idea of the impact, and that's, and I can't remember my cross country. You think I would remember his name, and I cannot remember his name at all. I cannot, but I can remember, experiences that were important. So it underscores how you just never know what you do and what impact it's going to have on a kid's trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So true, Janine, so true. Yeah.
So Antoine de Saint-Exupéry in the book The Little Prince, which in my opinion is the best youth development book ever written on planet Earth. There's no better textbook to youth development than The Little Prince. He wrote, what's most important is invisible to the eye. And what we really do is make love visible. And it's scary. It's a scary thing to make that visible, especially to a young person who knows or has at least an inclination that they don't have much love or support in their life. And so we got to be very careful with this work. That's why I said you would never do this to a child who you don't know, because you're opening up a can of worms. And unless you're willing to sit there in the circle and deal with it, let it go. And if you want to open up this can of worms, connect with that kid and then show them what you know. Show them what you can make it visible. It's a powerful thing. When I came back from Houston, two of the many people in the room, but 2 of them texted me long after and said, I'm 45 years old, been teaching for 22 years, and you just changed my life. And it's something that she didn't already know. Her name was Shauna. She already knew it. She just didn't have a language for it. And so by doing what Janine just said, what can happen is that little kid, that little Janine, can say to that English teacher, you know what, you're one of my 5. And that English teacher will know what that means. And she'll get a dose, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and so will you, and it'll strengthen the bond. And that teacher will actually give you more, and you'll catch more because you made what was invisible visible. It also may help you to know that there's some people that really think they're on your list and they're not. Because that's just as important to know, that there's some people out there trying their darndest to throw strings to you, and they're missing, and they're blaming you, when in fact it's just not your time. You're not that connected to them. You're not catching the strings that they think that you're catching, and they're frustrated by it. And it's just a lack of relationship. Many times in my life, I'm a counselor by education, got it in the 80s. I've never really used it, really. Part of this work came out of the fact that I just got tired, maybe like all y'all do, when you sit down in a counseling appointment and somebody gives you their, I call it walking on glass story, right? And so their narrative is so hurtful, and they're amplifying it right before you. And if you've ever done it like I used to do it, they say it just like it's a matter of fact. Yeah, I was raped twice and hurt this way and committed attempted suicide this way. I've been on opioids for 7 years. And they just boom, boom, boom. And I'm looking at them going, that is such a small part of who you are. And so the other truth is, it is important. Please don't think I'm crazy. But I figure the rest of the culture is talking about that. So how about giving like 5% of our time, 100% of my professional time, 5% of the whole exposure that he has to programs and social services, to saying, okay, we're going to start being a treasure hunter. Okay, you and I are going digging because there's some magic inside you and some beauty inside you. And good on you for having all that other stuff, because here you are alive looking at me. I'm not as tough as you. So let's find out really what the story behind the story is. And then rather than give you a pep talk, let me give you some metrics that together we can work to build this web of support that you need to change your narrative. And my clients back in the 90s, when we started learning this, would look at me like I was on drugs, like I was the craziest, most stupid, worthless therapist in the world. And I'd say, okay, I was in Juneau, Alaska. I'd say, let's go walk the docks. What? Well, let's go. We got an hour. Let's go walk the docks. So we'd go out to Harris Harbor and walk up and down the fishing boats. And he'd say, what are we doing? I said, we're walking the docks. He said, well, why? I said, well, I kind of like looking at the boats. It's kind of cool out here. And don't you want to talk? What do you want to talk about? Talk about anything you want to talk about. But I'm just looking at boats. And after a while, the guy, usually it was teenagers, would kind of realize that he's not really going to ask me typical questions and give me advice how to fix myself. We're really going to walk and look at these boats. And what do? We saw a boat that we liked. There happened to be a captain on board. Knock on the hull and say, hey, I'm Derek. This is Skylar. We really admire your boat. Skylar's like, what are you talking to a stranger for? It's like, he won't be a stranger in about 5 seconds. Right? He'll tell us about his boat. What are you fishing? How's the weather out there? Give us one story. Never had a fisherman not want to talk a little bit. Not much, just a little bit. And here's a kid who's got all kinds of stories about fishermen and how he's so oppressed, when instead of coaching him and giving him advice, I just modeled how you can knock on a hull of a boat and ask one simple question and have a human connection. And he's blown away. He thinks I'm a magician. And to me, that's just being a human being. It's not being an extrovert. It's just being curious and patient with someone else's walk on life. Okay. Any other questions, comments, or concerns before we move on? Or feelings? I would say that the elders would tell you that the most successful Native people are highly connected. And the disconnected, how did you learn to be highly connected? You learned to be highly connected by your connected anchors, who usually introduced you to people and built your web. And so I've never, ever been told I've worked with, 70 Native tribes. I've never been told that what I do is inappropriate with their children and their teenagers. So when I say never, I really mean never. They don't even consider me an assimilator. They wouldn't say that I'm trying to assimilate their kids. What they would say is that, I love their kids. So when their kids become my kids, what do you do then? Then all of a sudden I'm Yupik, or I'm Cree, or I'm Beaver, or I'm Shoshone, or I'm Lakota. If I love their kids, it's part of kinship networks that are as old as time, old as cavemen and women, old as Western Europe, so good on you. It's a great point. Not yet. Mountains of Oaxaca, not yet. Mountains of Guatemala, not yet. So I'll keep my ears posted. Yeah. Yeah. Next color. So let's get a couple things clear. One, there is no agreed upon definition for what at-risk youth means. None. And if you can show me that I'm wrong, you email me, because that doesn't mean that there are certain people who have tried to define it, not certain programs who have, or agencies who have, or theorists. There's 100 definitions out there, but no agreed upon definition or metrics for at risk. And what happens is we all say at risk, and it has potentially 1,000 meanings, which therefore, in my work as a youth advocate, it has zero merit when we can't agree, because by saying at risk, I'm truncating what am I really telling a kid? We have people all over the country trained in my work. We work with kids usually in lock-in settings for 2 or 3 days. And if we do the survey at all, it's after 8 or 9 hours of priming the pump. So the kids know exactly what survey they're taking. Because remember, it's their data. We don't get to see it. We don't take it back to our national labs and aggregate the data and say the average data in Willmington, Delaware is this web of support. That would be meaningless. But we need to have the kid, because it's portable data, they need to understand what they're holding in their hand. Otherwise, what's the point? All I'll say is about that is I measure the effectiveness of professional carers. I don't measure the presence of professional carers. And there's a huge difference. Let me say that again. My work, the Web of Support, measures the effectiveness of professional carers, not their presence. And that is a huge difference, because Cynthia and I both believe programs don't raise kids, people raise kids, and people inside programs who see in full color change the developmental trajectory of children and teenagers. I guarantee it. Programs don't raise kids, people raise kids, and people inside programs employed by programs, when they see in full color, can become an anchor inside of a kid's web of support and grow that child's web and lengthen their developmental trajectory. That's not my opinion, that's data. Because what happens is when you start looking at the complexity of the life of a child, it doesn't narrow. You guys all know that. You're all nodding your head. You're postdoc, you're in graduate school, for crying out loud. You're older. You know the complexity of life. And you know that life in October, the first week, taking that survey, if I asked you December the same year, you might give me a whole different list. Or if I ask you October of the following year, or the previous year, that's the complexity of a developmental ecology. And that's what Yuri Brofenbrenner was teaching us. That's what Lev Vygotsky was teaching us, et al. Okay, so you just went through Roy. Roy is the nurture part of the nature-nurture debate. Roy is the nurture part of the nature-nurture debate. Roy can change very quickly. Parents get divorced, dad dies, favorite teacher retires, your parents change cities, you move. You grow, you change, your body changes. You start, your boys' voices change. Women develop breasts. Menses start. You're changing. It will change your web, or can change your web, depending on how observant the anchors are to your web. Depends on whether they're a witness to your life or not. Anchors typically are very deep witnesses to your life. They'll know when something's wrong. Your grandma says, honey, you want to talk? I don't want to talk, Grandma. I'm a little embarrassed about my voice changing and things happening over here. And okay, then when you're ready, or maybe you shouldn't talk to me. Maybe it's okay to talk to your grandpa. I'll talk to your grandpa. No, don't talk to grandpa. Don't talk to grandpa. No, you need to talk to somebody about it. It's okay. It's all just normal. It's not normal. I'm the only kid on the planet. The only boy on the planet losing my voice. It's only me. I'm special. So my point is, it's highly changeable. And on top of that ever-changing web, Roy, is nurture. And Cynthia opened this class with, we are not naive. There are genetic differences between us, thank God. And people don't really argue about them, but they're sure try and make one size fits all, even though we're all unique in all the world. So we do measure what's inside the balloon. Green is growing the balloon. Green is your innate resilience, really, is what we're measuring, your innate resilience. What our innate resilience really measures, this is, so we got a web. And all we measure is how sticky you are to that web. That's what innate resilience means. It does not mean you're better, smarter, more gifted. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that you're stickier. So bigger is a better image, but it's literally you won't fall through the cracks in your web, the holes in your web. And we measure we were going to measure the big 5 personality characteristics. Cynthia probably knows them. You probably all know them. They're the 5 personality characteristics that most Western psychologists agree are DNA based. We do use them to inform our 5, but you can't teach those to kids, and they're really hard to measure in a kid in a self-reported survey. So we measure gender. So we in our data sets, now gender is on a spectrum. We get it. We measure, and Cynthia and I were just talking about this, about he, she, them, and about how them is becoming more and more prevalent in my work, which I think is wise. I think so. I just think that if I were feeling the oppression as a female, I'd say them too, just to change the whole debate. I'm them. So don't do that to me. Don't oppress me, mate. And so women, though, in our data sets, women who check the gender box of girl versus boy tend to be bigger balloons than boys. Girls tend to have thicker webs, 18 strings as the average compared to 16, and they tend to stay connected to any web that they have, less risk behaviors. That is a burden and a blessing. If you think about a female on a web, being bigger on top of a web that's harming you connects you more to harm. And a boy who's less sticky to the web that is harming them, a boy may flee more quickly, push back more quickly. So it's a burden and a blessing. Burden and a blessing. We measure some other things that are inside the balloon. And kids are very eager to find out how big a balloon they are. And they're all disappointed that they mostly tend to be pretty typical. Why is that? Because our data set shows that 80% of the kids are typical balloons. And you can say, Derek, statistically, that's not possible because a bell curve would show up at 68%. And you're showing 80%. We show 80% because we show kids in that range that's where they move between. So they move inside of that bell, inside of that hump. And 10% tend to be very, very big balloons, very innately resilient. Those are the kids in our programs, the poster children, who we read about in books and novels and literature. This kid was Ramus and Remus, raised by wolves in a den in Rome, and suckled the wolf mother, and then became leaders of the Roman legions. And, well, we write stories about those big balloons raised by wolves. Those are very unusual. They're unicorns. But about 10% of our kids are those kids. That's why there's no at risk. You can't use that definition because oftentimes our silly culture identifies my big balloon, thinly webbed kids as at risk, and there ain't nothing at risk about them. Zero at risk about them. They're high flyers. They're unicorns. But some moron will say, well, you came from not an intact family, or you're from poverty, or you're a kid of color, you're on the Blackfoot Reservation, so you are a at-risk kid, which is just a bunch of horse hockey. That's just a lie. That's just a lie. And my kids know it. From now on, after they work in full color, they go, I'm not risking my Derek. I said, not even a little. Now, we still can thicken your web. There's no downside, buddy, but you really are going to be okay. I know. I'm just, all these adults. I said, I know. They don't know you. So, DNA-based stuff. Next, trauma. We do measure trauma. We don't give it a separate color, and we don't amplify it because trauma is real. My kids have been hurt. Trauma is real. My kids have been hurt. And trauma does not define them. Because I was undercutting her whole work, and I was telling these kids who had been traumatized that through love and through love and web building, we're going to mitigate that trauma. We're going to mitigate. She just thought I was a kook. So what we didn't discount the therapist, the psychologist, the psychiatrist. But when you get a kid thickly webbed enough, I'll guarantee you that counselor, therapist, or psychologist will matter more because they're thickly webbed. If you give a kid a therapist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, a school psychologist before they're webbed up enough, it's a crapshoot. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what kind of outcomes you're going to get. When I met Dr. Folletti through a backdoor way, some of my people are in Santa Cruz, California, and Dr. Folletti was presenting on ACEs. This was back about 10 years ago. And one of my staff members, just one of my team members, she face turned all red. She goes, I know what to do with this. I can, because one of the questions from the group of 220 social workers was, well, what do we do now? We know ACEs. We know trauma matters. What do we do? And he said, well, we're not really sure yet. And Jen sat in the back room going, what the hell do you mean we're not sure yet? We know what to do. And she said she was scared. She was in the back middle, and she said, Derek, I turned all red. My voice was cracking. This is the Dr. Folletti. This is the guy. And so she raised her hand and said, Dr. Folletti, and she gave the napkin talk, the napkin talk that you watched, and some of you are going to watch after this. 7 minutes. And the whole room listened. And Dr. Folletti at the end of that said, well, that'll work. And so I got to meet Dr. Folletti in San Diego. He and I were keynoting a conference together. So when you sit at the front table, there's a little bit of a pecking order, and you get to, well, who are you? Why are you up here? Everybody's kind of, who are you? And so I said, Dr. Folletti, you know me. You remember Santa Cruz? A woman standing up. Oh yeah. Oh, you're that guy. So we spent a good hour talking. He says, that's brilliant. Listen to what we do with kids. Listen, this is... So you guys, do all of you know what fishing leads look like? When you go to Walmart, so Janine's on her head, Bridget, Alex, you know what fishing leads look like? You do, Tiana? Fishing leads? All right. If you go to Walmart to the sports shop, there's a little flat disc you can buy. And as you turn the disc, there's many different sizes of lead that hold your line, your minnow or your worm down into the water so the fish can come by and bite it. So more lead sinks larger minnows or larger worms, right? The more bait you have, the more weight you need. So Dr. Folletti, with his 11 ACEs, he started with 9, he's at 11. Some people have taken great, remarkably stupid angles. That is not an opinion. They have added sinkers or trauma to Dr. Folletti's list because they think he just missed them in his data sets of 240,000 people. Dr. Folletti's not an idiot. He didn't miss them. They weren't there. But depending on the program you're in, people just feel pretty easy to, well, let's add some trauma because that hurts too, right? So the trauma list is getting really long. And they will give a kid, they'll give a kid an ACE survey anonymously. And just like you made 3 dashes on the bottom, they'll have the kids add them up. And then they'll collect them. And they'll tell the kids the data that if you've got 4 or more of these, you are 64% chance of being obese. If you have 6 or more of these, you have a 52% chance of having multiple marriages. If you have 0 to 2 of these, you have blah, blah, blah percentage. And my kids are going, holy cow. And I'm going, that's evil. You're telling, not only are you telling my kids are at risk, now you're actually giving them a percentage based on a number you just gave them on a snapshot in time of how their lives are going to suck and be more difficult than the kid who has less aces over there. You, of course, in this group would never, ever do that. 1, you're educated, and 2, you're taking Cynthia's class, and you would never give an ACEs survey without context. So, what does context mean? We show Roy. We show green. We show the web you're on. Then we take those traumas, we call them sinkers. My kids wanted to call them stinkers, but it didn't play well in the dominant culture. But my kids said they're stinkers. They're like moose poop, moose droppings. Moose poop like a big rabbit. Those of you who haven't seen moose poop. And so that's what they think. They're like moose poop, moose dung. And so we used sinkers because my kids will literally, I will take those little Walmart discs and open them up, and my kid will come up with 6 aces on their survey. I'll have them go up as a group, and I will let them choose the size of their sinker. And I will have kids stand up and ponder that for minutes. Was my house burning down, big one or small one, today? Was my parents' divorce a big one? It is for some kids. Some kids will ask me, Derek, do I have to pick a sinker for my parents' divorce? The best thing that ever happened to me. No, you don't need to pick one for your parents' divorce. That's somebody else's theory. You can have no sinker, and even though it checked on the box, right? You get it, everybody? You get it? You get to choose your pain. And then the kids will take those sinkers and they'll drop them in their balloons. And nobody knows. And once they're dropped, we don't count them. We don't make it public. But they're inside the balloons. And then what we proceed to teach them is that sinker does not shrink the size of your balloon. It doesn't shrink the size of your web. But those sinkers keep you a little bit closer to that web, keep you a little bit from taking risks that are needed to grow the web or grow your balloon. And what we will do oftentimes, if I'm in a small enough school, we'll walk to the library, if there still is one, and we'll talk about the autobiography section, whether it be Canada, whether it be Mexico, whether it be United States, and say this shelves are filled with people's autobiographies and biographies, who had sinkers. Maya Angelou. We can go through a whole list, you guys. And those sinkers, I don't expect any 16-year-old in my midst to say those sinkers are the best thing that ever happened to me. But I do expect that you will use the energy from those sinkers to grow your balloon and make your balloon so big, the sinker may never go away. But it may be like a BB in a boxcar. We talk about it all the time, and I have some huge balloons. We'll put some sinkers in, and we'll keep blowing that balloon up, and blowing that balloon up, blowing that balloon up, until the kids, we start bopping that balloon around, and the kids, you can't even tell there's any sinkers in there. I say, yeah, but they're there. Wow. Mind blown. You mean I don't have to spend my whole life trying to get rid of a sinker? No, you don't. It's called post-traumatic growth. You can actually, through the course of your life, you'll always be aware of it. I have sinkers, guys. I have sinkers. I'm sure all of you do. And if you don't have them yet, they're coming because you're a human being and life is hard, right? Life is really hard. But we get to pick it. We don't get to, oh, you went through divorce? You should have a size 6 sinker. No, it's about a 2. No. It should be because it was a 6 for me, so it's a 6 for you. No, I believe it's a 6 for you, but it's okay that it's a 2 for me. Oh, you just had breast cancer. That's an 8. Yeah, I don't think so. I think for me it was probably a 5. Wow, you're in denial. No, I'm not in denial. I get to define my developmental ecology. And it's okay that you call yours an 8, but you don't need to call mine a 5. Or, conversely, mine was only a 2. Why do you dare call yours a 5? Suck it up. It's only a 2. Mine was only a 2. Ergo, yours should be only a 2. No, that's ridiculous. You get to pick your pain. My kids love it. Because sometimes my thinly webbed kids are so over-programmaticized and so over-labeled and so over-surveyed that they don't know what to do about all these labels that they've been given. And when they start seeing themselves in full color instead of black and white, poof! It's like they get a little bit, some of them will get a little bit mad. Why didn't you tell me this? Like when I was 10. Why am I learning this when I'm 18 or 40 or 30? It's okay. Better late than never. Okay. Scissors cuts. We're going to go through these quickly because I only got 10 minutes. Scissors cuts are the things that a youth do in their control, and outside that's blue, that cuts at the web of support. And we teach them we don't teach them that this is your brain on drugs. Don't do crystal meth because your teeth will rot out. We teach them don't do crystal meth because you'll blow up your web so fast that you won't even know what happened to you. And for those of you who are thickly webbed, you would die for your web. You'd give them your kidney. You got an extra kidney that matches? You love somebody? Here's a kidney. Right? That's what web does. You do not do crystal meth and try and disappoint someone who would give you their kidney. That's insane. The trouble is we have so many disconnected kids who've got no one to disappoint. Nothing to lose. No one to lose. Next color is indigo, caring for the carers. This is a tricky one. But all of these colors have equal value. All of these colors have equal value. All these colors have equal weight in our statistical analysis of them. And that is each of you need a web of support. If you're anchoring a kid, you need a web under you. And right now we have developed the teacher support card. It's specific to classroom teachers. It's really a good instrument. We're working on a more general youth or adult support card, an anchor support card. The teacher support card is really good, but it is education classroom specific, which is not reality for most anchors. Most anchors are not teachers. We have a lot of lonely adults out there, guys. And it might be you too. And we get really busy. And we're hustling. And I could make a case that I lost my 26-year marriage because I over-leveraged my best friend and my wife by being gone too much and by pursuing this call. Cynthia knows I feel like it's a call. It's an urge.
It's a call.
And I'm happily married. I'm happily married again. I'm okay. But I'll tell you, if you're not careful, we get lonely. And then things shift dramatically. And you guys got to make time for your anchors. You got to have a web because you can't give what you don't have. You won't value what you don't value. You will not value for kids if you don't have it yourself. If you don't have a web, you're going to tell kids to suck it up because that's what you're doing. Sucking it up and getting exhausted. You're going to burn out. If you have a thick web, I'll bet you dollars to donuts that your burn rate is going to be far more slow because you'll have more perspective. And for those of you in classroom teachers, if your web is only inside your school, you're going to feel like you're working all the time. You're going to feel like you go to work 24/7. And the only way I can mitigate that is to say, add more people outside of your work environment who really don't care what the drama of the school day is like. And you're going to find them in churches and community organizations, and you're going to find them through your kids' parents, and you're going to find them through your kids, you're going to find them. And that will enhance your social capital so that you value the social capital of others. The last color is social norms. It's violet. And it's the wind that blows across this whole web. And some communities have very have social norms that blow up the web or make it very difficult to build in. But I'm telling you, I work in very wealthy communities where in neighborhoods inside those communities, those kids are very thinly webbed, even though they have all the money in an 8,000 square foot house. And I work in some places that the government says are pretty poor or at risk. And I'm telling you, some of those kids are way thickly webbed. And it's partially because of social norms that the social norms increase connectedness or get in the way of connectedness. And we can measure that. The last thing I'll say is the web of support is a better predictor of your kids' success, the kids you love, than their race. When I showed you that snapshot, you cannot tell me if that kid is Native American, African American, European American, Hispanic American. You cannot tell me what cultural group they come from. It's impossible. You can't tell me, class, how much money those people have, their parents have. You can't tell me. And if you'd take a guess, you'd be wrong. It's that non-connected. Like, really, Derek? Yeah, poor people love their kids and sometimes rich people don't. Next one. You can't tell if that kid's from a single parent family or the Waltons. What? You cannot. You look at that. I showed you that an hour and a half ago. That support card. You cannot tell me if that kid has got ma, pa, grandpa, grandma, and John Boy under their roof, or if that's a single dad doing the best he can by his kids. You can't tell. And finally, you can't tell the kid's gender. You can't tell me if that's a boy or a girl. And all of those 4 sacred cows are measured extensively by the U.S. government and state governments. How much money do you have? What race are you? What gender are you? Are you in a single parent household? When the web of support is a better predictor than those sacred cows. And I've done this, Cynthia knows, so long, since 1994, that I used to be a nutcase, and now I'm kind of popular. I lived long enough to be popular. Go figure. And I hope to live long enough to be right.
You're already right, Derek.
Good on you. Good on you. So, just to blow your mind and maybe get invited to another class, I just showed you Roy G. Biv, and I do children's rights work around the world out of Victoria, British Columbia. And we add 2 colors. We add infrared, which is the rule of law, the Declaration on the Rights of the Child, which the United States has not ratified, but 194 nations have. And so when I go working in Southeast Asia, I got a project in Nigeria, I got one in Kenya, I got one in Europe. We can measure whether the children's rights are being made manifest on the ground in the community. And then finally, ultraviolet is attachment to place. Because you know that the place, not only the community you grow up in, but the mountains and the water are full of stories and full of places that you played and interacted with people, and are places that grew your food and you could breathe the air, and the climate wasn't changing, forcing you to move to a strange place. So we look literally at 9 colors, and we teach kids how to be self-agents in their own developmental ecology, and like the Little Prince, tame their foxes, find their roses, and move from planet to planet to find the one that best fits you. Ha!
Amen.
How's that, Cynthia?
Amen.
Amen.
You are always in perfect timing. Yes. Derek, I can't thank you enough for giving us this time. The only drawback of this hour and a half is that I can only speak for myself. It takes me much longer now to process this. It's only just come in. And now, although I have heard this so many times, and I've taught this, and I've taught it, people have caught it, I've blown up balloons, I've shared the web, I have the yarn. But it still takes time over hours and days and weeks to process this and to really own it. I anticipate that that will probably be true for the 9 of you who are on the call tonight, and for Amy also when she goes through this. So I would like to propose, and this is based on a private conversation I had with one of you, that we have the opportunity at some point before the semester is over, and sooner than later, for anyone who would care to, for me to set up a Zoom if anyone would like to talk about this. And I will put something out in our chat so that we can talk about the possible, not in this chat, but in a discussion chat. We can talk about a time that's mutually convenient for the most people, that maybe we can come together and play with these ideas a little bit. I also realize that this is not easy stuff. There's a big difference between reading about this in a book and actually experiencing it. Yeah. And so if you are having feelings right now, like it has just jumped into you and you are experiencing it heavily, I'm with you there, because I am too. And it's not my first time, but I am with you there. So sit with it tonight, sit with it tomorrow. If you want to get in touch with me, get in touch with me. I know you get in touch with each other because you're a tight learning community, but feel free to reach me if you'd like to. And if you'd have some questions that you would like to ask Derek, I can connect you with Derek as well.
Yes, you can.
And I will keep Derek connected to us,
yes,
and in future courses that we have as well. So does anybody have any? It's 8:30 now, but if anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to make as we close down, please feel free.
You guys, you just drank through the fire hose.
Yeah, they
and
did.
As Cynthia said, you drank through the fire hose, and you know what happens. It hurts. You got to remember what I said an hour ago. You're okay. If you're sitting where you're sitting at this time of your life, somehow you're a big enough balloon on the web that you got with the sinkers you have. And you keep that narrative. All I showed you is how you can make it a little bit easier on you by growing your balloon and growing your web. I am committed. I don't turn over logs without, I'm eyes to eyes, soul to soul. Cynthia will give you my email. If you want to talk, if you want to push back, guys, I look forward to a new argument. Teach me, right? Come on, teach me. Show me what you're learning. I'd be honored to, as best as I can in the time that we have together, to prepare you to love kids better and help and support them to be co-creators of their world instead of being defined by a bunch of people who see in black and white. I am Cynthia. I'm sincere.
I know it.
I will make time.
Thank you. And thank you, Derek. And good night, everyone. And Derek, I love you, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye.